French will always be vulnerable in North America, so it's my duty, it's my responsibility to protect and promote French in Quebec.
That was Premier François Legault speaking earlier this week after Quebec's National Assembly adopted Bill 96. The contentious legislation is designed to protect the French language, but it's left linguistic minorities in the province worried about their own rights. Earlier, I put some of those concerns to the CAQ's MNA, Mathieu Lévesque. He's the parliamentary assistant to Quebec's Minister of Justice. Mathieu Lévesque, nice to see you. Thank you for making the time for us.
Thank you for having me.
I guess I want to start, first of all, by getting your reaction to this piece of legislation, specifically from Ottawa. Are you surprised that there has been a desire, I think, to perhaps intervene at some point on this legislation by the federal government?
Of course, it's surprising. It's mainly the timing is surprising because the law has not yet been sanctioned by the lieutenant governor. It will happen next week. So the law is not in force right now. It will happen in the next weeks. So that's a little surprising. And there's no situation where the bill has been challenged in courts right now. So we're not quite sure how to take this or understand the situation right now because it's not in front of the courts right now.
But do you expect it will be? I mean, it seems fairly likely that there will be some sort of legal challenge.
It is likely, but we cannot say it will happen or not. Yeah. But at this point in time, and especially with the situation with Bill 21, the judgment has not been rendered by the Court of Appeal, sure. and there's no judgment yet on Bill 96.
Your boss, the Justice Minister, has said that Anglophones, Indigenous people, and other minorities shouldn't be worried. I think the language that he used was that there is no hidden agenda. But when you look at, for instance, the aspect around healthcare, it does seem as though there will be limits on how you can communicate with your medical professional. Quebec's College of Physicians released a letter, I'm sure you know this week as well, saying that there is confusion, that there is, at very least, confusion for medical professionals and patients. How will that work then? How will the law be put into place in that specific example of healthcare?
Healthcare. I really, really want to reassure our fellow citizens that it's very clear on the issue of healthcare that in no way Bill 96 prevent any citizen from receiving proper care. That's has been said at the beginning when the bill was tabled, and it is said again because honestly, the bill does not modify any principles or right provided for in the Act respecting health services and social services. And there's also been a specific amendment in Bill 96 to protect that right. So I really want to reassure everyone that it will have access to the proper care, and no matter the language.
Okay, but just so I'm clear, sure, you'll have access to the health care you need, but will you be allowed to communicate with the health care provider in the language of your choice?
Absolutely, that's what the bill says, and the amendment as well to clarify that situation has been added, and and I want to reassure everyone that's not going to be an issue. If you need healthcare services in English, you will receive them. Our priority is the health and safety of the population.
So let's talk a little bit about refugees and immigrants. So they will have 6 months to sort of get up to speed, after which they will be required to communicate to the government in French. There are concerns, as you can imagine, around that. And I wonder whether you are concerned that will prevent immigrants and refugees from coming to Quebec who may be worried about that time frame.
Well, perhaps just a little historical reminder here. Since 1977, when Bill 101 was passed, it has stipulated that immigrants must be integrated in French in Quebec, yeah. And we've seen an important issue that only 53.7% of the newcomers transfer to the French language, compared to other provinces where 99% transfer to English. So that's a big issue in order to preserve the French language. And of course, the bill aims to ensure that immigrants settled in Quebec integrate in the official language, so which is French, but also for that specific 6 months period that you mentioned, exceptions will be made and are made in Bill 96, of course, regarding healthcare, safety, emergency reasons, or where required by principle of natural justice. So that's very included in the bill.
Okay, let's talk about the notwithstanding clause, because this is the second time now your government has chosen to use this in a preemptive way, suggesting that you know that this piece of legislation is going to create legal problems, and that the charter itself is there not to protect the majority, but exists to protect the minority. What do you say to that?
Well, there's two principles that are at stake there. The first principle is the parliamentary sovereignty, which comes from the common law with the British Parliament at Westminster, which says that the sovereignty resides within the democratically elected officials like us, the MNAs, and in order to represent the will of the people and the democracy, the notwithstanding clause has been included in the Constitution, and that was also the deal that was struck between the provinces and the federal government at the time in order to have that balance. So I think it's a fair way to say that if we want to protect the French language in Quebec, which is right now declining, so there are less and less French speakers, so we want to make sure that the French is protected, and in that situation, the clause is useful to protect those rights, those collective rights as well, by the democratically elected MNAs at the National Assembly.
Yeah, and I'm not questioning that you shouldn't have the right to defend the French language. Obviously, it's important, but I wonder why you're using the notwithstanding and the cover of the charter, which is as I said, was put in place not to protect the majority, which is still the case in Quebec. French-speaking people are still the majority, but to protect the minority rights of people.
But the issue there is very much so the protection of the French language, and we've seen what happened with Bill 101 in the past. The tribunals up to the Supreme Court, they cut off lots of important parts of Bill 101. So we want to make sure, in order to prevent and to protect the French language and to prevent that to happen again, we wanted to protect the Bill 96. And protect those collective rights of the Quebec nation to make sure that in 50, 100, 200 years, we still speak French in Quebec.
Okay, Monsieur Lévesque, merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, thank you so much.
Despite those reassurances from the Quebec government, concerns remain about how the law will be enforced and, of course, the use of the notwithstanding clause. Anthony Housefather is a Quebec Liberal MP who has been actively speaking out against Bill 96. I asked him about potential consequences inside and outside of Quebec. Mr. Housefather, nice to see you.
Nice to be here.
So you wrote an op-ed this week in English and French with 3 other Quebec Liberal MPs, arguing that Bill 96 fails to find the right balance in terms of the legislation. What is your biggest concern with Bill 96?
My biggest concern is, as an English-speaking Quebecer, it misdiagnoses what the problem is in terms of protecting French. French, as we all know, is a language that is a minority language in North America and vulnerable from international forces. But it's not the English-speaking minority in Quebec that is causing declines in French. And I think that the bill takes away rights of the English-speaking community in Quebec to do many things that we've done in English in Quebec since Confederation. And that doesn't promote French or help French at all. It just makes our increasingly bilingual English-speaking community feel marginalized and wondering about what its place is in this province.
I spoke to Mathieu Lévesque. He's the CAQ MNA, the assistant to the Justice Minister, the Secretary to the Justice Minister. And I asked him specifically about healthcare, because I know that's been of concern to many Anglophones in Quebec. And he says you will be able to access healthcare in English. He reiterated what you've already heard from the Legault government, that there's no hidden agenda, that this is really about the decline of the French language in the province. What do you say to that?
Well, let me start by saying that I see no reason why then, if it's about the decline of the French language, that English-speaking Quebecers will no longer be able to get birth certificates, death certificates, or marriage certificates in English. Why, if I do a contract to sell my house to another English-speaking person, I will no longer be able to file that contract in English with the registry office. We'll have to do the contract in French. why I, as an attorney, can no longer communicate with the Quebec bar in English. All of these things don't help one Francophone. They just mean English-speaking Quebecers no longer get services in English. And when it comes to what he's claiming with respect to healthcare, let's look at the general rule. The general rule in the bill, for the very first time in Quebec history, access to English schools is what is tied to your right to get government services in English. So only those people who were educated in English in Canada or whose parents were educated in English in Canada are supposed to be able to access government services in English, provincial and municipal, along with those who arrived in the last 6 months, recent immigrants. After 6 months, and if you don't have access to English schools, you don't have a right to government services in English. And with respect to healthcare, they did add into the bill some provisions with respect to healthcare, but I don't read that as a general difference from that rule. I read that as in exceptional circumstances. For example, you're going into the emergency room, right. You're able to get served in English if you need to be. But if I'm looking for psychological help, if I'm looking for a physio, if I'm looking to get non-urgent medical care, I don't see this exception applies.
There was some reaction from your government this week. Justice Minister Lametti criticized the bill, said the federal government could intervene as it plans to with Bill 21 if it goes to the Supreme Court. Would you have wanted to see more from your government even before this point and even before it gets to that stage in the courts?
So I've been deeply involved in these discussions, sensitizing my caucus for the last year since this bill has been tabled to its implications. I've been speaking out against it. I did so when the Bloc had their motion on the Constitution last year. And I've been talking about the need for the federal government to take the stand that the preemptive and omnibus use of the notwithstanding clause is impermissible constitutionally. And I was very pleased to hear David Lametti, who I have great respect for as Attorney General and Minister of Justice, announce this week that we will intervene in the Bill 21 case at the Supreme Court, which undoubtedly is where it will land shortly after the Court of Appeals renders its judgment, because the preemptive and omnibus use of the notwithstanding clause is the same in Bill 21 and in Bill 96. So whatever that decision is in Bill 21, it will apply to 96 equally.
What are your concerns around the use of the notwithstanding clause preemptively in both of these cases, and what it could mean for minority rights writ large across the country?
What it means is essentially you're saying that the courts have interpreted a right, they've said a right exists, and that the government is not within its reasonable limitations under Section 1, because every right is subject to what is reasonable in a free and democratic society in terms of limitations. The court has said that's not the case. The court has said a right exists and the government is restraining it beyond what is reasonable in a free and democratic society. So if you like the use of the notwithstanding clause in one case because for whatever reason you disagree with the court's judgment, the next government will use it to override a right that you do agree with. Yeah. And I don't think that this is the way the game should be played. Courts are there to interpret rights, and we should accept that. But what is even worse in this case, because the notwithstanding clause can be used. It's in the charter today. We understand that, and I accept it, even though I disagree with it. But what I don't agree with is where the court is not allowed to even opine on it in terms of saying that something is unconstitutional and striking it down because the government has used the notwithstanding clause preemptively. Yeah. This was supposed to be at the end of a long discussion, not at the beginning of one.
Let me just end, Mr. Housefather, on your concerns for anglophones in Quebec. What is your main fear that as this moves forward?
It will drastically change the life of many people who prefer to use English as their primary language in Quebec, even though they are fully bilingual, and even though they want to protect and promote French. And I guess as a member of Quebec's English-speaking community, a community that is one of the most bilingual in Canada, where nearly 90% of our youth are bilingual, we just feel that this bill targets us in a way that makes us feel like strangers in our own province. And this is just not okay.
Anthony Housefather, thank you for your perspective today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.